Hello, and welcome to podcast number 2 of the Your OKC Property Manager podcast. I'm Siva, and today's episode is titled Property Manager Responsibilities, What Property Owners Need to Know. I'm here with Scott Nachatilo. Hi, Scott.
Hello.
Scott's broker and owner of OKC Home Realty Services, LLC, one of the top property management companies in the Oklahoma City metro area. Today, we'll be exploring the essential responsibilities of property managers and why understanding these roles is crucial for property owners. So, why don't we jump right in? To start off, why is it important for property owners to understand the responsibilities of a property manager?
Sure. Thanks, Siva. Again, yeah. Thank you very much for agreeing to help out with this podcast. Really appreciate your help with that. Clarity is super important because hiring a property management company, whether you like it or not, it's a little bit like getting married. You know, we always enter into an agreement with our clients, and it's not one of those things that's until death do we part, but there's rules we both have to follow as owners and as property management companies. And so I'm looking to add some clarity to what those things include. When you're looking to start with a new property management company, it's super important that you know what that property management agreement says, and it should lay out who is responsible for exactly what.
Awesome. So, what are the first steps you take when getting a property ready to rent?
Well, a couple of simple things. One is the property needs to be clean. It needs to be clean. Things in the house need to be in working order. We don't ever want to move a tenant in where, let's say, we have problems right from the start. That's just a really bad way to get going with the tenant, and you don't want to get off on a real bad start with that, even if you're not the one getting all the blowback from that, like we do as property managers. A couple of other simple things. Take everything out of the property. Well, I get a question a lot of times. Well, what about renting out a property with furnishings in place? Can I just leave? Like some people, they leave the state for a time because they're being transferred by work or something, and they just don't have time to like get rid of all the things in the house. Well, it's very difficult to do, and we do long-term rentals, and so that means that we're setting up 12-month rental agreements, and it's just really hard to find a family or an individual who is willing and able to rent a house with a bunch of furnishings that's already there. Sometimes they want that, but most often it's not the case. And so all these things in the house, they need to go. And the other thing is to get the property really clean. I think I mentioned that before, but yeah, that's super important. Get the property clean. You can always have, if you don't have a cleaning service, and you've moved and you just don't have time to deal with that, put that on us, because we've got a lot of good contacts for cleaners, and we can get your property spotless. It's just going to cost you a little bit of money. That's all.
Awesome. So, in order to make the property appealing to potential tenants, can you share some tips on how to stage the property correctly?
Sure. Staging really comes into play, I think, more with home sales, although there are some cases where with rentals, people stage their rentals, especially if it's like more of an upscale property. But in general, we don't really do any staging such as that. But what is necessary, again, I'll kind of go back to what I just said. Property needs to be cleaned, right? And things need to work.
So, In order to attract a great tenant, how do you create a compelling listing for your rental properties?
So probably the key things are to have good photos in your listing, and then right after that, sometimes even more important these days, is to have video. And what I don't see a lot of in good listings are just a video walkthrough where we've got footage of what it looks like to walk through the house, because it's hard for someone to kind of imagine how things lay out in a property if they're just looking at some photos. But when they see a video, it really helps them kind of piece that what that looks together, or what that looks like in their minds. Uh, uh, that's uh, that's what I would say is, and to put it on the right websites.
So, with attracting a great potential tenant, where are the best places to advertise?
Well, we advertise on 15 key websites. Probably the one that gets you the most traction is Zillow for rentals. So we always post on Zillow. That is a paid. You do have to pay for that, but it's important to be on there because it gets a lot of traffic. And we post it on our own website, which also gets quite a bit of traffic too.
Okay, so how do you efficiently schedule and coordinate property showings?
Yeah, we use a software called Tenant, and that's a really nice software because it helps us to set up our in person showings. It is a way to also build a waiting list. Like sometimes when we will post a property before the tenant moves out, once they give us notice. And the advantage there is that we can advertise it, a month ahead of time before we're going to have that person move out. And so a lot of times we can even get an applicant or two, for that property even before they move out of the property, or anyone has actually seen the property. And it sends reminders to the people who want to see the property prior to their showing. It's a really great tool to help facilitate those showings.
Okay, so what if not enough people are requesting a showing?
Well, if we've got to change something, if we're not getting enough showings, and we we have leasing agents who are assigned to each one of our listings, and they keep a track of what the response is for the property. So if we're not getting enough people who are requesting information about the property, requesting showings, then, like, most commonly what we will do is recommend a price drop in the rent, and that way we can drop the price enough so that we do start getting applications and people interested in the property.
Say someone does go to a showing and they decide to apply. What does the application process look like and what are the qualifications?
Right. So a question I ask when the prospective owners, when they call, I will ask them, how important is it for you to have a good tenant in the property? Almost everybody says, yeah, it's super important. You have to get that. You have to get the step right of putting the right person in the property, and that means doing a careful job of screening up front. And for example, one of the things that we look for is income. We need to have that person at three times their take home pay needs to be three times the rent. And so we will get copies of their pay stubs. We'll reach out to their employer because we want to make sure that, number one, they're not submitting fake pay stubs, and number two, that they work where they say they work. We also check their background. I mean, we need to find out if they've had evictions, if they've had some kind of criminal activity going on recently, and what that consists of, and their credit. So we pull their credit, we check their credit score, and see if they have any debts in collection, or if they have what all that looks like. So we get a good idea for what kind of a credit risk that person is. Now, we always use legal screening. We have to comply with fair housing. If we're going to deny an applicant, we have to deny that applicant for legal reasons. By doing so, then we keep ourselves out of trouble as a property management company, and we keep the owners out of trouble, because if there's a fair housing issue, then they get drug into it as well.
Okay, so say they do get approved and they get the lease signed. What exactly is in the lease, and what key elements should a good lease agreement include?
Well, a good lease is going to address anything that comes up as an issue. So, I mean, we've done this business. We've done property management for, from this company for the last 12 years. I managed my own properties for a long time, even before that. It's just you see what things come up over and over again, and sometimes there's something that comes up rarely, but it still needs to be somewhere in the lease. And also getting an attorney to review our lease. We also do that. And so when there's a dispute with the tenant, we can refer to that lease, and there's very rarely is there a case when that situation isn't addressed somewhere in the lease.
Okay, so do you use the lease that was created by the Oklahoma Real Estate Commission?
Well, we don't. We feel like the lease that we have is it's a fair lease. It's legal, but it also, I think the way to say is maybe that it addresses some things that that standard lease created by the Real Estate Commission um, doesn't address.
How do you determine the appropriate amount for a security deposit?
We set the security deposit amounts equal to 1 month of rent, and that's fairly common in our marketplace in Oklahoma City here. And so it's something that potential renters are used to and accustomed to. So it works pretty well.
Okay, what methods do you use for collecting rent?
We have a tenant portal, and right now between 85 and 90% of all of our payments are made through that portal. I mean, and the portal is flexible. It accepts a number of different types of payments.
Okay, so what happens if one of your tenants does stop paying rent?
Well, have to be we have to be ready for that to happen. And if God forbid the tenant stops paying rent, we we would hope that it doesn't end in an eviction, because those are expensive for the owner. But our role is to, number one, send them out a notice right away if we haven't received their rent. If they've missed, we make rents due on the first and late on the second, as a general rule in our leases. Sometimes we will make some modifications to that depending upon the tenant's specific situation, but that's generally the case. If they're not being the next step is if we're not getting a response from them and they haven't paid, then we will post a 5-day notice on their door and send that notice by certified mail, which is the legal steps that one needs to take when starting an eviction on a tenant. If that 5 days runs its course and we still haven't received payment, we turn that file over to the attorney uh, and file for eviction. The attorney files for eviction, and
Okay.
that's what happens.
Okay. So with property manager collecting rent, how do you handle financial reporting for the property owner?
So we create an itemized statement for the owner every month. We create this itemized statement, and it has all the rents that we collected during that statement period and any expenses that were incurred against that property. And so obviously the rent minus expenses is equal to what the deposit will be for the for the rents, and that's the amount that we send to the owner uh, based on what bank account they designated they wanted to have their rent deposited into.
Okay, so you said that gets sent out on the 10th. What happens if something happens with rent and the tenant pays after the 10th? Does the owner have to wait until the next statement period to receive their rent?
Yeah, so we don't make the owner wait until the next month. Sometimes the tenant pays. I mean, things happen in their life, and they end up paying late for whatever reason. And if that is the case, we always do a second round of statements for the benefit of our owners who had a tenant that just they for whatever reason paid late in the month. And so we send out that second statement with the rent that didn't get sent out initially.
Okay. So should the property management company be responsible for maintenance if it comes up?
Yes, as an owner, you really don't want to have the tenants calling you for anything. And just the reason for that is uh, it's not that we're trying to keep secrets or anything like that. It's really just because it's our job to be that buffer between the tenant and you, so they're not bugging you on your time off about hey, there's a leak on under my sink or something, and they need the tenants need to be reporting that to our company, and then we'll get the maintenance for that item handled appropriately. We'll I'm not saying that we're trying to put people off, or we do want to get that maintenance item handled as quickly as possible. That just makes make the tenant happy. Especially if you have something like a leaking sink, you don't want that water dripping underneath a cabinet and destroying things. We want to get a repair like that made as quickly as possible to prevent damage, really.
So with you as that buffer, would the tenant even have the contact for the owner?
We don't provide that information. Most of our owners don't want that. And it's just, as I said, it's just not a good idea because you don't you don't want the tenant every time there's a problem going around the property management company to try to get things done. You want the tenant. I mean, that our the reason that the owners hire us is to be the go-between and to be the ones to get those calls so they don't have to.
Okay. So it sounds like a lot of your maintenance is in-house and it's handled. What's the benefit of having an in-house maintenance team?
Yes, there are two. I mean, we have two main sources of labor to get maintenance done. One is in-house, and these are employees who we've hired to work for us. Uh, the the benefit of having in-house maintenance is that we control their schedule. So if we need to, if it's something where, hey, we need to get someone out there today or in the next 30 minutes, we've got that person we can send out to the property immediately. It also saves the owner money because at the rates that we send out our technicians, we're more reasonable than a contractor is going to be. I don't think I've ever seen where that's not the case. The other source of labor are just our third party contractors. Sometimes it just does make more sense to send out a contractor because it might be a specialty plumbing job. A lot of times with, say, clogged drains, the plumbers are just a lot more efficient at, and they have they have a wide selection of tools for those kind of jobs. So, like I said, sometimes it just makes more sense to send out a plumber rather than one of our maintenance guys.
Do you recommend home warranties?
Not generally. I mean, there's two problems there. I think the first problem is that it just makes for another real pain in the neck bureaucracy that doesn't really need to be there, because we need to contact the home warranty company, then the warranty company contacts a local vendor, and then we need to contact that local vendor to schedule, or the tenant. So anyway, there's all these extra contacts that need to happen, and it just it just really slows things down. It makes it a lot more frustrating for us as a property management company, for the tenant, because it takes longer. Because just imagine, if, let's say, you have a heat and air problem, and the air conditioning is out, and it's, it's 100 degrees, and it may be a day or two before we can get the maintenance, get the home warranty company out there to take care of the problem. Well, we can't have the tenant in a house like that for 2 days. Excuse me. We either need to send out window units for temporary relief from the heat, or send them to a hotel. In which case, either one of those is going to be expensive on the owner. And the other problem is that I I I just don't see the that the home warranty companies are saving the owner any money versus what it would cost for them just to have the work done by one of our vendors.
Okay. So, do you recommend property inspections?
Yeah, we call them maintenance surveys, and generally we will require at least one per year. We just don't want to have a situation where we've got a tenant in a property and we just haven't had eyes on that property for an entire year. You know, we want to make sure that there's nothing going on in that property that's not appropriate, and it might be causing damage, or the tenant might, somehow might be tearing up the property. We want to have eyes on that property. So the our schedule for that is generally 2 to 3 months before the lease renewal, or before the lease expires. And that way we can have we send one of our maintenance technicians out there, and they have kind of an app that they work with, and they take a whole bunch of photos from different parts of the property, and just assess all kinds of things, including like property condition, how the tenant's keeping up the property, if there's any unreported maintenance items that need to be taken care of. So that comes up in the form of a report that we also share with the owner, and that way the owner can see what the property looks like on the inside, and have a comfort level that, for what, that the property is not being torn up. And it also gives us a way to, evaluate whether or not we should be offering a lease renewal to this person.
Okay. So, kind of back to the maintenance. If it does come up that you do need some work done, How do you prepare cost estimates for maintenance on the properties?
So sometimes that's just strictly with a bid, like if it's from a third party contractor, from a plumber or something. Let's say we had to replace a sewer line in the yard because it collapsed. Well, they would provide an estimate for that. If it's for something that our in-house maintenance is doing, we provide the same sort of thing, an estimated number of hours with an estimated labor cost, or I'm sorry, material cost as well.
So if it does come up that work is needed or there's some other issue at the property, how do you ensure that these issues are resolved efficiently and to everyone's satisfaction?
So one thing that comes up from time to time is that the tenant will not want to take responsibility for damage that they've caused. There'll be some excuse as to why they shouldn't be charged for something. This just came up with a window break that we had recently, where they said that they weren't responsible for the glass break, and yet it was clear that I mean, there was really no way that it would have been caused by a storm. So our job is to put that charge on the tenant's ledger and to stand up for the owner and say, yeah, that no, that's not going to work. You are responsible. There's no way that glass break was caused by a hailstorm or something. That doesn't make any sense. So in that case, it may not be to the tenant's satisfaction that we're not going along with their story, but they weren't telling the truth in that case. In a case where we're being lied to, I'm sorry, we're not just going to go along with that. We are going to go along with the contractor that said there's no way that this damage could have been caused by a storm.
So to recap, what are the key takeaways for property owners regarding property manager responsibilities?
I'd say the takeaway, or the one thing to take away for sure, is to really pay attention to what the property management agreement says, because that outlines what the property's manager's responsibility is and what you as the homeowner, what your responsibility is.
Okay, thank you. And if our listeners want to find more information and resources on property management or talk to you, where can they go?
Well, I would direct them to go to our website, which is yourokcpropertymanager.com. And we've got a lot of articles on there that cover all kinds of different topics, from leasing to tenant screening, a lot of different things that we talked about during our podcast today. And also, if you have a property that you're considering leasing out, probably the easiest thing to do is to click on that little button that says request a phone appointment. We'll book you in a 15-minute phone appointment. We can talk it over with you, kind of let you know what your options are, and hopefully provide you some additional information you didn't have before you started the call.
Well, thanks, Scott, for sharing your insights with us today. And if this podcast was helpful to you, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to see the next one. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.